So after Aljamain Sterling was given the win against Henry Cejudo at UFC 288, it's got to be Sean O'Malley next. We know that for sure. They had the moment in the cage where both of them were trash-talking each other. We had the moment where Merab took the coat of Sean O'Malley and started wearing it, and that's going around everywhere. The whole situation has gone viral. It would be silly not to take advantage of this sudden boom in popularity around the idea of that fight, and they've got to make it next. They're going to make it next. We know they are. Whether it be September or August, we know that that is the fight. So I think it's time to start discussing that. And I'm going to talk about my reaction to that matchup being made and just how I feel about the matchup in general. And also talk about who I believe is going to win. And I guess maybe I could start straight away with who I believe is going to win, because I believe that Aljamain Sterling is going to have a really easy time against Sean O'Malley. And I also believe that Sean O'Malley really didn't want Aljamain Sterling to win that fight against Henry Cejudo. As much as he might say, oh, well, you know, I liked the matchup against Cejudo more because I don't like him as much and I wanted to fight him, he knows for sure Aljamain Sterling is a much tougher matchup than Henry Cejudo is for him. And that's just a reality, because with Henry Cejudo, he's never really been able to be offensively really good with his wrestling. He's obviously a solid wrestler and very difficult to take down, and was able to take down Aljamain Sterling. But the danger that a fighter faces with Cejudo on top of them compared to Aljamain Sterling are two completely different things, because Aljo has the jiu-jitsu game advantage over Henry Cejudo, even if Cejudo might have a slight wrestling advantage over Aljamain Sterling. And Sean O'Malley knows that. He knows that going into the matchup. I believe that Aljamain Sterling will defeat Sean O'Malley in their potential matchup down the line, which no doubt will be happening at this point. And I think it's going to be because Sean O'Malley is so tall. And I think Aljamain Sterling's grappling style will work better against a taller opponent than it will against a shorter opponent. He likes to put the hooks in on the back. He likes to establish back control. It's just easier to control a guy on the ground if you're a guy like Aljamain Sterling, if they're taller. We saw this against Corey Sandhagen. He immediately got the back against a cage and submitted him in the first round. Now, would that happen 10 out of 10 times? I doubt it, but one thing's for sure, when we've seen Aljamain Sterling wrestle against taller opponents compared to shorter opponents, he's had a much easier time against taller opponents, especially when that taller opponent is a guy who doesn't have a wrestling background like Sean O'Malley. Now, I do believe that Sean O'Malley's jiu-jitsu is very underrated. He had a lot of attacks for Piotr Jan to deal with whenever Jan took him down. But the fact that I'm even saying when Jan took him down, I know maybe he wasn't preparing fully for grappling in that matchup, but the fact that I'm even saying that when Jan took him down is a problem, in my opinion, because Aljamain Sterling has a much better offensive grappling game than Piotr Jan, and he's way more dangerous when he's on top position as well. And I think that's going to be a big problem for Sean O'Malley, because we saw a lot of the defense from Sean O'Malley against Piotr Jan was to sort of turn his back against a cage, fight the hands, try and separate the grip, and that's where you've got a guy like Aljamain Sterling who's going to drag you down to the canvas, put one hook in, start threatening with some stuff, put the other hook in, and all of a sudden you've got Aljo on your back, which is the worst position to be in with Aljamain Sterling. So I do believe that Aljamain Sterling's going to win that fight by first or second round rear naked choke, maybe TKO to ground and pound. I think it's going to be a really good one for him. I just think that when Cejudo's in there against Aljo, great wrestler in Henry Cejudo, by the way, and good jiu-jitsu skills as well, a veteran of MMA that's 36, and he's had his whole career in the sport of MMA. I feel as though Henry Cejudo proved that there were a lot of problems with Aljo's game at times because he's taken on such a short, stocky wrestler with the skills that Cejudo has. He was still able to do good in the grappling against Cejudo. He still got takedowns here and there. He still got one hook in on the back. But because Cejudo's so short, he's hard to control, because he can sit up in positions where a taller guy can't. He can get to his knees and get his legs under him to where a guy with really long legs on the ground, like O'Malley or Sandhagen, just can't do. It's the same reason why Volkanovski was such a problem for Islam Makhachev in the grappling, compared to someone who arguably on paper has better grappling on paper than Volkanovski and Charles Oliveira and other fighters that Makhachev has quite easily taken down. We saw it with Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan. Makhachev wasn't able to control a shorter, stockier wrestler in the same way he would against a taller guy. Bobby Green has a wrestling background. Maybe he's not as good at grappling in MMA as an Arman Tsarukyan, but we saw once he was laid flat on his back, it was a problem, and Islam Makhachev was able to do whatever he wanted with him. But we saw, even against Oliveira, the same situation for Islam Makhachev. But against Arman, you can sit up in certain positions a tall guy can't. You know what I mean? You're harder to sort of like break down the structure of. You know what I'm saying? What building's going to fall over first? The short, stocky building or the really tall, thin building? And a big gust of wind could take that over. I'm not saying that literally, but you know what I'm saying? The same sort of rule applies when you have that center of mass at a low point. And O'Malley's center of mass is going to be so high, I think it's going to be problems for him. I think he's going to get toppled over. I think there's going to be hooks put in on the back in moments. And I know that O'Malley's going to be fighting that whole fight with a big fear of the takedown. I believe that O'Malley would fight Cejudo, knowing that for a long point of that fight, O'Malley's going to be in a striking match with Cejudo. He knows that. Cejudo probably would go out there and try and figure out O'Malley for a bit before he ever shoots for a takedown. Because, of course, Cejudo being so short, he's open for a knee up the middle from Sean O'Malley. We saw him land that on Piotr Yan in round 3. O'Malley has the ability to go for these flying knees and reactionary moments that are going to KO a short, stocky wrestler. And I think that Cejudo is a much better matchup for O'Malley than Aljamain Sterling is. Whereas Aljo, he's weird on the feet. You know what I mean? He does shoot from far out, but not early on in a fight. Early on, he pressures you back up against the cage and then sort of finds the clinch and goes for a takedown from there. So I think he's a bit goofier on the feet. This is going to mean it's going to be harder for O'Malley to make his reads on the feet as well. The leg kick is going to be open for O'Malley, but you don't want to be leg kicking a wrestler too much. There's just so many problems for this matchup between O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling. You know what I mean? Aljo will shoot 18 takedowns in a 25-minute fight. He'll shoot 25 if he needs to. He might gas out in the process, but he'll make sure to get his takedowns. Cejudo might shoot 4 or 5 in a 25-minute fight. You know what I mean? It's just a difference in approach. And not only has O'Malley got to deal with the weirdness on the feet of Sterling, but he's also got to deal with the fact that he knows a takedown could come at any point, and I think it's going to make him hesitant. And I know for a fact, when he was waiting for the decision to be read, no one should truly know who won that Sterling-Cejudo fight live. It takes going back and watching it again to know. The fact that he was like, I thought Cejudo won 4-1, I think. 3-1, I thought he said. I thought Cejudo won 3-1 that fight. And he was just openly saying, I thought Cejudo got it easily and all this type of stuff. I think he knows Cejudo was such a better matchup, and this is a bad matchup. This is a really bad matchup. You know what I mean? Sandhagen's no joke on the ground. We've seen Sandhagen before the Sterling fight deal with wrestlers, escape submissions, have good scrambles, even start to use his wrestling offensively now, as we've seen against Song Yudong and Marlon Vera. He can offensively wrestle. He can use that part of his game. He's very well rounded. And even then, Aljo was able to back him up, take him down. Now O'Malley does have more power than Sandhagen. And maybe O'Malley's going to land a flying knee or a couple of leg kicks that change the fight and then be able to survive on the ground. Because again, O'Malley knows this entire time off, he's not a dumb guy. You know what I mean? For an MMA fighter, he's quite smart. Now, for an average citizen, that makes you still pretty dumb. But for an MMA fighter, he's quite a smart guy compared to the rest of them. And that's very evident by the way he's managed his career so far. But he's been out this entire time training grappling. That is a part of this. But I do want to mention as well, Aljo's been training his grappling. Dude, training with Merab on a daily basis, that's got to be great work. And there's a reason why they're sticking together so much and why Aljo values the training partner of Merab so much as well. He knows Merab is good work for him in the gym. I would argue, I don't care whatever training clips they show, I would argue Merab out-wrestles Aljo. If not for the early takedown moments and scrambles, if they have a 30-minute wrestling match, in the last 10 minutes, I bet you it's Merab throwing Aljo around. So it's great work for Aljo. He's had him for a long time now, and he's been training for a wrestler in Henry Cejudo. He's just going to translate this over to his next training camp. And I might make a video on this. There's a lot of talk about O'Malley. You better keep your weight low because we're fighting soon. And they're planning on turning around Aljamain Sterling real quick to fight in September or August even they're thinking about. I heard even the month of July brought up for Aljamain Sterling. So they're trying to get one over on him in terms of the creation of this fight. But I think if you're Aljamain Sterling, the quicker you take this Sean O'Malley fight, the better. You're the guy in the prime. O'Malley's the guy coming up. You know what I'm saying? O'Malley's the guy coming up in the division. You're the guy in his prime right now. How old is Aljo? He's 33 years of age. He's going to be 34 in July. You don't know how much longer he's going to have this prime for. And although maybe a training camp back-to-back is going to be too tough on him because he's not used to doing that, he likes to take a 6-month break here and there, relax after a fight, recompose himself, and then get back into a training camp. I think O'Malley, he's a learner. You know what I mean? And he's the younger guy and he's a learner. So if you're Aljo, you're like, you know what? I'm going to get this guy as young as possible. O'Malley's 28 years of age. He's not near 29. He's going to be 29 in October. He's going to be picking things up this whole time. So although he thinks he's getting Aljo on a quick turnaround, that's going to be in his mind, in Aljo's mind, to go into the fight with the most confidence he can. He should be thinking, I'm getting the worst version of O'Malley for the next 4 or 5 years. The sooner I take this fight, the better, because O'Malley's only going to be getting better as time goes on. So the earlier he fights him, the better it is for him. If Aljo waits another 6 months, O'Malley's going to improve and try and make up the difference for that long. I just don't like this matchup for O'Malley. I really don't. Trash talk wise, who knows? This could get Aljo a bit of fans because although O'Malley is a personality and he has a massive following on Instagram and stuff like that, he's not very good on the mic when it comes to press conferences. So maybe this is going to be a time where Aljo can really win over the fans because although again O'Malley is famous and he does his hair a funny way and he hangs around with 6ix9ine and the Nelk Boys and stuff like that, Aljo might be able to get his way on the microphone in the build-up. So there's going to be a chance for him to win a fan base here. There's definitely going to be a chance for him to just win the fight in general, which I think he will, and I think he'll do it in the first or second round. And there's also going to be a chance afterwards for him to move up and fight Volk. Volk's already been like, yeah, I knew the winner was going to call me out. I'm open to it if they sort of clear out their division and I clear out mine. Holloway's just beat Arnold Allen. That was supposed to be the next guy for Volkanovski if he does beat Yair Rodriguez. So if Volk beats Rodriguez in July and Aljo beats O'Malley in August, and I don't know, they're having a Makhachev fight in October, and after that, Makhachev's planning on coming back in April of next year because he wants to take 6 months off between fights. All of a sudden, we're looking at Volk versus Aljo in December or January, which I think Volk would undoubtedly win because I think he's almost like just a better, more in prime version of Cejudo, who's way more powerful, way more tough, way better conditioned somehow. Volk's a monster. For whatever reason that might be at CKB. A couple of these gyms seem to have a few fighters that just are training a different way than everyone else that's been doing the sport for decades. You know what I'm saying? It's weird how that works. But either way, I do think O'Malley would lose that matchup. He has got a chance to KO Aljo. Aljo is hittable, and he will have a big advantage. Maybe he'll land a bunch of good leg kicks. Also, he moves a lot, and it's going to be hard for Aljo to get a hold of him. That's something that's going to be very important. But I don't think I'm going to see O'Malley KO Aljo in the first minute. And I know Aljo's going to go at him crazy. First title fight of O'Malley's career. For Aljo, this is becoming a normal situation for him now to fight for a belt and put it all on the line. This is the huge moment in the career of Sean O'Malley. He's not going to be the most active. He's going to have had about 10 months off, whereas Aljo's going to have a quick turnaround and stay active. And Aljo's going to go straight across the cage, pressure him with weird movement, fake a couple takedowns and not go for him, make O'Malley get all jitterish against the cage, and then throw shots into the clinch, get his hands together, drag down O'Malley, hooks in. If O'Malley survives and has a chance every round to try and make something happen on the feet, that's a different story. Maybe that way he could win, but he doesn't have the wrestling background as a kid. And Cejudo was an Olympian, and I know he was 36 and he had a long time off, but he still has a hell of a credential advantage over O'Malley, and Aljo was able to get him down. So I think Aljo's going to be able to get O'Malley down, and I'm seeing an O'Malley losing in the first or second round, which won't be terrible for him because he'll still be a top contender. And once Aljo and Merab are gone, which will be soon because, again, Merab's not that young himself. You know what I mean? I think Merab's like 32, 33 as well. I'm just going to check. He's 32. These guys are going to go soon. And O'Malley's 28. So there's still going to be a chance at a future era for O'Malley where, well, then Umar Nurmagomedov, these grapplers, dude, they're ruining everything. Then an Umar Nurmagomedov's going to come up. So I guess that's going to be the other conversation. But again, Umar, He likes to strike. So there's just a bunch of better matchups on the horizon for O'Malley. In Sandhagen, in Rob Font coming up. You know, you've got other fighters coming up right now. Well, actually, no, a lot of them just lost. Yanez lost. Gutierrez lost. So never mind. But a Song Yadong matchup is way more favorable for O'Malley. You know what I'm saying. Maybe Vera bounces back, builds himself up. Maybe if O'Malley loses to Aljo, they just do him versus Vera. If Vera beats a Song Yadong in a rematch, who knows? But yeah, I just think O'Malley will have his time, but not right now. Not while Aljo's champ. I don't like the matchup whatsoever. And I know that O'Malley doesn't like the matchup. I sense that from him. The way he acted in terms of like his initial reaction, which was captured on video, the way he came into the cage, he wanted all of that to be against Cejudo. He thought Cejudo was going to win, and he waited out the title shot. Because of that reason, Aljo said that in the ring, and I was like, yeah, that's true. Aljo said in the ring, then why did you turn down the title shot? It was supposed to be Aljo versus O'Malley last night. But O'Malley went, no, I'll wait, you know. I've got my title shot. I'll just wait around, you know. Cejudo can fight for the belt. He was hoping and praying that a better matchup for himself in Cejudo would come in, beat Aljo in the meantime because of his wrestling skill, and maybe beat Aljo on the feet enough to win, which he almost did. And then he would go in there and fight a shorter Cejudo who isn't as good with the offensive grappling or jiu-jitsu. Backfired. Now he's got to risk it all against Aljo, who I believe should be over a 2-1 favourite against O'Malley. Like and subscribe. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.